Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well out there. All right, so on my radio show that I work for the KSL Sports Zone, I'm the executive producer of DJ and PK, and I've been in that role for 10 years plus now. Well, we have had many a conversation with former BYU athletic director Rondo Fehlberg. And in the aftermath of Tom Holmoe's announcement that he's stepping down from his position and retiring as BYU athletic director, we had Rondo on the show last week. And a statement he made during that interview has started to catch a little bit of fire with regards to what it means for BYU. And he said that he was very surprised that a BYU booster, was it Paul Lillianquist, I think was his name, essentially said that we will not be outbid. And he said it absolutely floored him. It surprised him that a BYU booster would make such a bold statement because, as Rondo says, BYU needs to understand that they are what he says, the big dog of the Big 12. That's the direct quote, big dog of the Big 12. But Rondo also cautioned, saying that BYU doesn't want to be out there, as he says, pounding their chest and saying, hey, we are that big dog. You want others, whether it's people inside the Big 12, whether it's people in the national media, your rival, whoever it may be, you want them to make that statement for you, speaking of BYU. I found that very interesting because Rondo obviously presided over BYU during an era where they were the big dog of the WAC and the Mountain West Conference. BYU controlled those leagues and really had run of the shop for long stretches of their runs in those respective two conferences. They went independent for a spell. They had their opportunities in the West Coast Conference, but never really could get over the hump against the likes of Gonzaga in that league. So I'm thinking that Rondo may be coming from a place where he is still reflecting on where BYU was in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s, and may not be where BYU is right now. I believe the answer to Rondo Fehlberg's question is yes and no. And that sounds like a cop-out, and I completely understand why you think it's a cop-out. But here's the deal. BYU has the potential to be a big dog, to use that quote once again, to be a big dog of the Big 12. But are they there right now? I don't think so. I think BYU in their heart of hearts understands that in time, they could become the big dog of the Big 12, but it's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take a lot of results. It's going to take a lot of investment, NIL, all the different features of what college sports represents right now and what it requires to succeed at a high level. That is all in the potential for BYU. If they can continue to have the results they've had on the football field right now, on the basketball court, an 11-2 football campaign, right now a BYU basketball team that's trending towards maybe getting a single-digit seed in the NCAA tournament. Kevin Young looks like he's got a really good thing building with BYU basketball. If they can continue to build on that, that doesn't even negate what BYU's other sports are doing. Speaking of women's soccer, baseball, softball, men's and women's volleyball, the tennis programs, swim and dive, track and field, cross country, or national champions. They have got a ton of athletics programs that can make national noise in their respective spheres and could help BYU emerge as that big dog. But is BYU the big dog right now in the Big 12? I don't think they are. That's where the no comes in to my conversation. BYU understands their place in the Big 12, and they understand what they're striving to build within the conference. Rondo's right. The BYU wants the rest of the world to tell them, hey, that BYU, they're that Leviathan out there in the Big 12. But it's going to take time to become that for them to say that. He admitted, speaking of Rondo, that it's going to ruffle feathers of the Big 12 for him to make such a statement. And I understand why it would, because it sounds better than thou, that type of stuff with regards to BYU that already has a reputation as a church-affiliated school. Having that reputation, it gets shoved in BYU fans' faces by their rivals all the time that you guys think you're better than us. But all that stuff exists out there. BYU has every resource on the table and in reserve that it could unleash to become that juggernaut, Leviathan, big dog of the Big 12 conference, but they're not quite there yet. The track record suggests that BYU is on the right path because, as I mentioned, the big two sports that really lead the way are off to really, really solid starts in the Big 12. Obviously, football stumbled out of the gate going 5-7, but bounced back with a really impressive 11-2 season last year. And we just talked about the fact that I feel like BYU has got a major opportunity in 2025 to go out and really show what they're capable of. to the nation. And if they can do that, that starts to put together that, hey, BYU may be emerging as one of the forces in this conference. And as you build upon that, the recruiting, the investment, the NIL, all the different machinations that would lend itself to BYU emerging as the major player in the Big 12 conference, they're all on the table right now. Basketball is in the same circumstance. Mark Pope had a really, really fantastic debut season in the Big 12 when expectations were really low. Obviously, expectations were raised a little bit this year with Kevin Young taking over, and they have, I think, exceeded them to this point, albeit some of you may have had unrealistic expectations because of the investment in NIL, the recruiting that Kevin Young has been doing, obviously the additions he's made via recruiting and the like. But if this can be a proven track record, if you can start to put together and build upon the successes that you're having with BYU sports, yeah, in time, BYU will become that big dog in the conference, and they will have those other people saying it for them, even though it'll be through clenched teeth, and they'll be more complaining about the fact that BYU is that proverbial big dog versus them being that. There has been a power vacuum at the top of the Big 12 since Oklahoma and Texas exited the league after they joined the SEC. And it's going to take time for one or two or three teams to really emerge as those power programs in this new look Big 12. But there is no reason to think that Rondo Fehlberg is wrong in saying that BYU is a big dog. He is right in the belief that BYU can get there. But for him to say that BYU is, I think is a little haughty. I think it's a little over the top to say they like is his present term, if you forget what I'm going with. Whereas I think BYU could be in time. I hopefully that delineation is more clear. They have everything on the table for BYU sports. And with the added investment and the overall investment and the interest from BYU's collective donor base, we're talking the Ryan Smiths of the world and on down to the lowest of the low Cougar Club members, the investments have been coming in hot and heavy for BYU. And so long as those investments are used in the right way, they're invested strategically, and they benefit BYU obviously in the form of wins on the gridiron, on the basketball court, or whatever other sporting venue or apparatus you want to talk about. BYU in time can emerge as that team that will have the rest of the nation, the rest of the Big 12 talking about them, and they won't have to go out there, puff out their chest, and say what they're doing. The one thing Rondo also said is that the next Big 12, not the next Big 12, the next BYU athletic director, they have to take the momentum that Tom Homo has built up in the lead up to getting into the Big 12, what they've created through the first 2 years, and he cannot let it fall by the wayside. So whether it is a Brian Santiago, whether it is somebody from the outside that takes over as BYU AD, their marching orders are clear. Build upon this. Don't let it fall flat. If you let it fall flat, yeah, then BYU will never become the big dog of the Big 12 because it's hard to regain the momentum that BYU is established right now. And if you let it fall by the wayside, that would be a major disappointment and would negate everything that Tom Homo, Rondo Fehlberg, Val Hale, Glenn Tuckett, on down the list of the great BYU ADs of yesteryear, Elaine Michaelis, etc. All of that would have fallen by the wayside if BYU becomes the doormat of the Big 12 versus the big dog.